All right. We will go back then, right now, to Denise Baran-Unland. Denise, along with being our co-founder and co-leader extraordinaire, she likes to tell me that she's the features editor for the Herald News, but I got news. She's the entire damn feature section for the Herald News. She is the author of the Bryony series, Supernatural Literary Trilogy for Young and New Adults, and about 286 other things, including the third book of her latest trilogy. What's five? Series. Okay, it's a series. And the first 3 installments have now been published, including the latest one this week. That is titled Before the Blood. The 2 more installments are coming soon. Truly, Denise is, I like to say, she's a cottage industry unto herself. She's an inspiration to a lot of us. And so tonight she's going to be reading a selection from Before the Blood and from her children's book series, Cornell Dart. But let's start with Before the Blood, and then we'll double back after we come back around. So here is Denise.
And actually, I didn't bring the second one because I didn't know you were showing up, and that was more for you than so that's all right. And just as a kind of a side thing is, with my series, I have like some other product stuff. And one thing I have is a 5-cent homemade soy candle line, and I have them here, but because the woman who made the candles has lung cancer, so I'm trying to sell the rest of the candles. I have just a little bit left. I do have them here if anybody is interested in looking at them afterwards, so I have to put in a plug for Valerie. I don't even feel like I should read this. There's been like this amazing talent. I feel like I should just go sit down. So I don't write. I don't, except for the Herald News, where I tend to, write. I like to think very nice human interest stories. My fiction is not lofty. It doesn't have a social justice bent. It isn't anything except just fiction. And the trilogy is, it's a young adult vampire trilogy, which isn't like Twilight. And the prequel, to which this is from, that Tom was referring, is kind of like people's backstories before they had vampires. So it's sometimes hard to get something that's a nice arc out of a whole novel. I don't write short stories. So what I have is something from the 5th book, which isn't published, and it's about it's a young woman named Bryony. She grew up in a very remote fishing village, and it's in the late 19th century. She has never really been out. She has just married this man named John Simons, and he is a pianist and composer. He has money, so he has built a mansion in that fishing village, so they live a little bit outside of that. And they are leaving on their honeymoon. And this is the first time she has been outside the village. So they've been on the road a couple of days. They're in the first city that she's going to see, and we'll just kind of pick up the story from here. The only part that you may need to know is that she has been sick with what had been, we would call today as anemia, and she had grown up on kind of a vegetarian diet, and she's now supposed to be eating meat for a reason that's doesn't need to be known, except it would just sound strange. She's been avoiding it. So okay, here's the selection. "We board in an hour," John said over the clanging as he helped her down near a squared structure. Bryony looked past the tracks to open snowy fields and no lake. She turned around and looked past the depot. Tall buildings covered in gray snow with streaked windows. Carriages splattering muddy snow, people shouting in the streets, scurrying to the platform with their satchels as best as they could on the slick boards, or dozing on benches, their caps drawn low and woolen scarves drawn up to their noses. The wind stung her cheeks as well as her nostrils, for it carried an odor not unlike the outhouses at Fisher Farm during a heat wave. Instantly, she recalled Dickens's Mugby Junction. "Guard, what place is this?" "Mugby Junction, sir." "A windy place." "Yes, it mostly is, sir." "And it looks comfortless indeed." "Yes, it generally does, sir." Bryony huddled closer to John. "What is this place?" "Thornton, where we catch our train." She crinkled her nose. "It smells." John laughed and stroked her head. "Let's eat." She looked around and saw nothing of grandeur. "Where?" There, he pointed to a building across the street, a straightforward, unadorned structure, a place too ordinary for a man like John Simons. She looked up at him, puzzled. This isn't too primitive for you? Nothing is too primitive for me. In fact, our mansion is my first home. But you're so rich. I am. And you've never lived in a home? Well, I've lived in my father's home. Was it a nice home? It was an opulent home. And I've also lived in garrets, cheap hotels, and eaten from garbage cans. Now let's go. Holding her skirts high with one hand and clutching John's arm with the other, she gingerly followed his lead across the slippery road, dodging sticky piles of horse waste and skidding aside just in time when one horse suddenly decided to release Niagara Falls onto the slush. Thornton Hotel was a straight, three-story building with its name painted on wood between the first and second floor windows. The planked walls had a faint pine scent. The hewn tables and chairs shone with many rubbings. The dining area held about a dozen chattering patrons. From the back of the room, Bryony heard the bang of a pot as it dropped and a loud crack, but she only smelled onions. So many people in a cramped, noisy space. She clutched John's coat sleeve tighter. John? Yes? He looked down at her, eyes quizzical. I'm hungry. Good. She almost said I want to go home, but stopped herself. For what was home if she was not Munsonville? And why didn't these places have lakes? Two? The question was posed by a little man with greasy hair and a stained white apron. Yes, John said. The man led them to a corner. On the table, a stiff white piece of paper decorated with brown smudges and bits of stuck blue bread, bill of fare. She sat and scanned the items. Oatmeal with milk, baked beans and bread, fish balls, hashed meat, fried potatoes, mutton chops, liver and onions, eggs. Mrs. Simons, do you understand? I do. Cyrus Newton writes them for Munsonville Inn. He posts it in the window. Order as much as you like. Bryony ordered the fish balls and fried potatoes. John added a side of hashed meat to her order and then proceeded to duplicate the whole for himself. The man in the white apron scratched the request on a pad of yellow-lined paper. A basket of bread, John added. Coffee. The man gave a queer little bow and hurried to the kitchen. John narrowed his eyes. Why the sudden aversion to meat? She looked at her lap. I don't like it much. I don't care. Bryony blinked, taken aback by the cold words from someone who dressed in hand fed her. Then her rebellious child raised her head and shot back. I don't care either, and you can't make me eat it. The man set down a set of white chip cups and saucers and quickly returned with a steaming tin pot from which he poured streams of coffee. When the man left, John sat back with a mean smile and reached for his handle. When it comes to your health, John said in an even, low tone, you'll do as you're told. Chastised, Bryony nursed her coffee and said no more. And neither did John. The food tasted as good as any food Mrs. Parks ever made, and Bryony ate all of it without prompting, even the hashed meat. John did not speak, but he did watch every bite, which is why she couldn't spit the meat out in her napkin. The meal ended with a deafening blast. Bryony started and almost spilled her coffee. John covered her hand and squeezed. It's the train whistle. But it's so loud. He chuckled softly. After John paid the bill, they walked back to the train depot, where Bryony saw an iron horse for the first time, up close, not an illustration in the Times. It gleamed like descriptions of obsidian in books and blew smoke like a dragon. On this dangerous beast, Bryony would ride with John. John? What if we're killed? We won't be killed. Bryony started to shake, and she grabbed John's arm. How do you know? He raised her face to his, and he never looked more kind. Because, he said, holding her chin with one gloved hand and brushing her tears away with the other, this is the beginning of our life together, not the end of it. But how do you know? Bryony, choose now, faith or fear. What do you mean? Choose. Bryony glanced at the crowds. A man in a suit and cap began ushering people onto the train. John made no move. If she chose fear, would they go home? But to which home? She couldn't return to the parsonage. She had to return to the mansion. And to return to the mansion without the hoped for and much anticipated adventure with John into his world would break her heart. Was this the only way? The train hissed, an oily, sinister, deadly hiss. All aboard! She looked up at John. He didn't look angry with her. He didn't look sad. He didn't look disappointed or annoyed. He simply stood, strong and stoic, and waited for her answer. Timidly, she raised her hand and pushed on his chest. John did not flinch, recoil, or otherwise react. She pushed harder, then gave him a shove. Finally, she raised a fist and punched him. Through it, John stood as immobile as the old oaks and maples inside her cowboy's woods. To make one of those trees fall to the ground required the vigor of many lumberjacks. And now she knew John never fell without a struggle, if indeed such a fall was possible. All aboard? If she clung to John, she too could weather the elements. She too could stand firm. All aboard! She reached up and grabbed his collar with two determined hands. Faith! He snatched her hand and dashed with her to the platform. The man ushered him up, so Bryony climbed the scary steps into the train with John behind her. So this is a train, Bryony thought. This is a train. What velvet richness inside the belly of a silvery beast. What plump seat cushions and gleaming metal. She smelled the heavy warmth of many bodies packed into the car like an abundant catch of fish. She smelled newsprint and sweat. The jabber added to the confusion. Was it too late to choose fear?
Thank you, Denise.